Tonight, the Senate is moving forward of a bipartisan approach to prevent a government shutdown. In the House, Speaker Kevin McCarthy is asking hard-right Republicans to pass their own temporary measure. It's a move the group has sworn they would not do. A House test vote is set for Friday, just one day before the shutdown deadline. The House bill would cut spending by 8% and toughen border security. The Senate bill would add $6 billion in Ukraine aid and $6 billion for U.S. disaster relief. Today, Nebraska Senator Pete Ricketts expressed frustration about how the budget has been handled since day one.
The president started off this whole process bad by not getting his budget done. We've already talked how Chuck Schumer, even though we had 12 appropriations bills come out of Appropriations Committee, didn't bring up any of them on the floor. So the whole process has got plenty of faults to point to it. So we need to get a better process, and it needs to start with the president getting his budget done first.
President Biden's budget came out March 9th, over a month after the February 6th deadline. Senator Ricketts also said if Ukraine funding is removed from the budget deal, he would still support it, even though he supports funding the country.